Thank you very much. This is super weird. I usually just organize this. I'm up here for like 2 minutes and I fuck off. And I'm weirdly nervous, so stick with me. Sorry about that in advance. I've prepared way too many slides. I like to call this the 101 of events and networking because there's literally 101 slides. I guarantee you it won't take forever. We'll hurry up. So let's get started. Yeah, Robin already talked about that. Unfortunately, Joe Breimer isn't here tonight. He will be here in the future at a future event. So we'll make sure that that talk still happens. Speaking about the future, the next Talk and Dev event, you will see this slide multiple times tonight. September 19th, we call the birthday edition of Talk and Dev, just because it's turning 2 years in July. So make sure to put this on your calendar and yeah, it'll be fun, hopefully. We already have 2 really, really cool speakers secured. So looking forward to seeing you there. Cool. RSVP tomorrow. The Facebook page is going up soon. This is me. As you may have noticed, I find it very weird to have pictures of yourself on a slide. That's fucking creepy. You may know me for organizing Talk and Dev. I am not 15. I look very young, but I'm actually 22, and I've been in games for like 6 years at this point. My schedule usually looks kind of like this. I'm on the road for like 250 days a year, somewhere between here and Bucharest and everywhere. This year it's a little bit less, but yeah, my living point is, or my home is an Airbnb, pretty much, or an airplane. So that's going to be part of my talk tonight. On the plus side, networking, that's kind of what I like to do, what I really enjoy doing. Not face-to-face talks, that's very weird for me, but at least networking is a bunch of fun. On the negative side, there's the bank account, which really doesn't like that at all. This is me. Again, it has nothing to do with this talk, but a couple weeks ago, a bird landed on my knee and I fed it pasta. Super weird, not sure why I kept it in here, but now you know. And I'm the publishing director for Those Awesome Guys, which is a bad name, but we'll get to it later. So yeah, video game publisher from Bucharest, Romania. Does everyone know what a publisher is? Hopefully, maybe. So my job literally is biz dev, scouting, management, some stuff on the creative side, but a lot of just organization and reaching out in a shit ton of emails and Discord calls. We do games in-house development and publishing. So we develop Move or Die. We published Monster Prom. I'm not sure why this is happening with the slides. And we like to put a lot of focus on community building. So everything from free content updates for like years to come for a game if it's successful, which luckily the 2 titles mentioned before have been, with both. In total, we've sold like of those 2 games combined. And we do a bunch of community outreach, press releases, influencers, platform holders, like all of this stuff. Essentially, in short, it's networking and obviously also events. That's kind of my background. Speaking of my background, what a horrible transition. This is my past. So I started off in this industry with a small company that used to be here in WERK1 called Salmi Games, VR and mobile developer, then transitioned into the Indie Mega Booth, which was like an indie curator, or still is an indie curator in North America and Asia. I did some work last year for a manga, anime, and games convention in Erfurt, Eastern Germany, called MAG. And I also do a ton of curation judging work for like the IGFs, some stuff for a bunch of events, doesn't matter. My past kind of consists of this, so varying sizes of groups of people, just networking, and anywhere from like the Indie Mega Booth in the top right corner at GDC with like 25 people to the MAG, which were like 200 exhibitors or something like that. And just a brief overview of events. This is kind of, I've been connected to all of these at some point, somehow, in various degrees, from organizing Talk and Dev or the Game Camp Munich to doing stuff for, to judging for Indie Arena booth or organizing stuff at Bit Summit. Yeah, the short compiled version of this is I do a ton of networking and a bunch of events this year, adding these 2 to the roster, and obviously Talk and Dev. Speaking of Talk and Dev, 19th of September. I promise you the slide is coming in a couple more times. So yeah, my events background, 2018. Too many events, I cannot recommend that. That will hurt your body significantly. Otherwise, I'm a super pessimistic person, and I also like stock footage. So I found this on the internet. I didn't really care to pay for it, but it looks horrible, and it's kind of there to symbolize my pessimism. I always look at everything very negatively, so just keep that in mind getting into this talk. So, the big question, why this talk? One thing I've seen over the last couple of years, especially within like smaller indie communities and junior roles and students, is there's a lot of fluctuation. There's a lot of new faces coming into the industry each and every year. Some stick around for years to come. A lot of other faces kind of disappear and end up outside of games, which is wonderful because usually that's where you get more money. We have this phenomenon, obviously, in Munich where TU München students kind of end up at BMW because they pay 5 times as much as games companies. But games are always fun, so I like to kind of show people at stuff like the German Dev Days how much fun it is to work in games and how you can maybe change not falling out of the games industry at some point. So this is kind of a warning talk, but also just like a short presentation of maybe how to get better at networking, not at talks, because I'm fucking nervous. So, networking. What is networking? Does anyone have a definition here? Any ideas what it could mean? You've all heard the term before. Caro. Any idea? Robin? Perfect. You two summarize it quite nicely. I like to combine it as a thing of you have your connection, your network of family members, of friends, of acquaintances from like school times or like in your adult life. Same thing applies for the games industry. So you will meet a ton of people in this industry, and if you want to do biz dev or anything in marketing PR, it's very helpful to have a network of contacts. So that's kind of why this talk. So why networking? To kind of go back on that. First point, obviously, is jobs. The games industry is a creative industry, so everyone at this point, if they don't found their own company, will have to apply for a job or get a job some other way. So obviously, there are universities which will give you a piece of paper that will, in some circumstances, obviously heavily help you or support you in getting a job. Oftentimes, the reason to or the end result of getting a job results in having references, in having a network, in having a contact. So that's very important to have when getting started in an industry. A second point, obviously, is business. Anything having to do with this games industry, at the end of the day, you will have to generate some form of income, as long as you're not government-driven. So you will have to have business deals in place to either generate money through selling your game on a platform, through selling maybe the rights of your game, or just selling assets as a company. Like there's a various degree of business models. Press, obviously, exposure is super important. Shitty German joke in the right side, maybe someone got it. I'm kind of ashamed about it. But good PR folks always have a good network of industry contacts, because sending out a press release, everyone can literally do that. It's not that hard. Having those established contacts already in place goes a very, very long way. And that's part of why you should build up a network. And obviously, there are 2 other ways of doing that, like reaching out via phone call or email. But realistically, we're in 2019, so it's kind of tricky to just cold call someone or send a random email that looks mostly like spam. So having a contact before reaching out is very helpful. Network with whom is the next question. Obviously, there's us, me as a publisher. You should talk to me if you have a game to pitch. There's also other publishers, but really, you should talk to me. That's kind of the gist of this. And there's also consoles, there's platform holders, there's a bunch of other logos I added in here, like Super, which is a fund, there's Kowloon, another fund, kind of funny over there. There's a bunch of outlets and companies or with whom you might want to network in your industry and kind of push your career forward. So there's really no excuse to never network, because worst case, you'll just make a new friend, which will be a point later or further down the road. Rules. There's nothing really set in stone, but one big part of networking is not appearing like you're a dick. So there are some things to keep in mind when networking. Disclaimer, obviously, some people are super introverted at first. I'm that sometimes, and that's perfectly fine. You'll kind of grow out of that role if you push yourself forward more and more over time. And it's totally okay to be introverted in the end. Maybe if you want to go directly into business development, you should try some other things in advance. Short summary, don't be like Draco Malfoy or don't be a dick. Sexism, racism, homophobia, any form of discrimination in this industry will backfire very quickly. If you want to be a dick, there's places for that. But within the games industry, yeah, you should maybe stick to just being a friendly person, and you will get along very well. with everyone, or with most of the people. Otherwise, yeah, everyone speaks with each other. This industry is super tiny. Like the entire games industry, according to Game from 2018, had about like less than 30,000 employees. That's less than Facebook. That is very, very small. So keep in mind, like if you're being an asshole to someone, that will kind of spread out very quickly. So just be yourself. Be professional. That's kind of being professional is kind of a overwhelming thing of all of these rules, but we can kind of break it down into a couple of simple points. One being, games industry is not a dating platform. It's totally cool to have like work and pleasure within one, but work should come first if you're doing like business development or any form of networking, then pleasure. I've heard from a lot of friends, mostly female, that is very tricky sometimes at events because men sometimes like to behave very differently. So yeah, it's not a dating platform, that's important. It's also not a beer festival. We're in Munich, we have beer here, which is great, but you should always kind of know your boundaries. There is beer here, thank you to CipSoft, thank you Ben, but yeah, just don't overdo it. It's always important to kind of stick to just being a normal person. Hygiene, it is, I don't see any, I wouldn't say anything, but generally like no one here, I don't think anyone in this kind of circle has anything to worry about. It's just nice to point it out always, like the games industry, this is a bad example because everyone's sweaty tonight, but if you're like if you're at Gamescom for 1 week, maybe pack more than 2 t-shirts. That's just, it sometimes still happens, which is unfortunate. Again, tonight, bad example. And be inclusive, which is, yeah, our name is bad. We're changing that soon, but that's always very nice. Otherwise, be authentic. People will very quickly notice when you're not being yourself. And that backfiring is not really the right term for that, but people will kind of just grow apart or not treat you the same way as if they knew you were being genuine about your approach to them. So you can talk about negative things, but don't be an asshole, don't talk shit about everyone all the time. Be recognizable is kind of a tricky thing. You shouldn't always, or you don't necessarily have to alter how you look or how you appear, but there can be a lot of different things of how you stand out from a crowd. One being, do you remember the story? Yeah, that's just like a stupid story that will stick in people's head, especially now that I pointed it out again to you. So if you have your own little dumb story that you can share, if you have your own story about how you got into this industry, or maybe even like Michael Liebe did, like always having his hat on at events, or maybe his flower shirt, that will stick out to a lot of people and people will keep you in mind. Maybe not your name, but at least like the guy with the flower shirt and the hat on. It's nice. Oh yeah, that's an elevator pitch. I didn't find a better gift for that. But essentially know how to pitch yourself. Not only your product, but also yourself. If you're a student and I'm talking to you and trying to figure out who you are, what you do, why we're talking right now, if you're maybe looking for a job, then you should know how to pitch yourself. Not say, hey, I'm a student and kind of end the conversation at that point, but tell me what you're doing. You're more than just a student. You're maybe a graphic designer. You're a programmer. You're working in marketing PR, trying to do that at some point. And if I know what you're trying to do, instead of just knowing that you're a student, that will help you, not necessarily with me, but in general within this industry a lot. Sticking out can be like even online. Like for example, our company color is orange, which sticks out very nicely online, and we put together these nice graphics and just put them everywhere. Very easy, like red hair, pink cap, that will stand out a lot. I always have this cap on, so people kind of remember me if it's not for other reasons, hopefully good ones. I always give out Interstellar copies to people at business meetings for some reason. There's literally no reason for that. I really like this movie. But yeah, people keep that in mind, and I've had people approach me that were like, hey, you're this weird Interstellar guy, aren't you? So that can be an approach, although it's too expensive to do that all the time. A cheaper option is I actually printed these ribbons that you can attach to your badge and gave them out at GDC. And this guy I've never met before came up to me at GDC and had one of those ribbons from like one of his friends, which is super weird, but always also fun. So that is something that keeps it, that will stick in people's heads, just being a little bit weird or just sticking out from the crowd. Start small is a nice approach as well. It doesn't have to be GDC, it doesn't have to be PAX, it can be a local event. You don't have to try to grow too fast. Speaking of local events, you know what's coming? Talk and Deaf, September 19th, you should all come. And don't be too pushy. If you... I just realized that. I didn't realize that earlier. Yeah, maybe that would, bad advice from me. I'm learning as well. Speaking of don't being too pushy, you can do that in your own presentation. Like it's already weird that you're hosting your own event and then talking at it. But what I mean with don't being pushy or don't be pushy is if you meet someone and it's clear that they don't have time for you, they have to go to a different meeting, or they just don't want to talk to you, which is fine. Don't try to push yourself into a conversation, because that person will also remember that, and not in a good way. Another very nice and weird graph is horizontal versus vertical. Rami put out a nice tweet, the kind of indie guy within this industry, about networking horizontally versus vertically. Essentially, networking should always be on a horizontal, meaning that people on the same layer within this industry. So if you're a student, you shouldn't always aim to just talk to people that are no longer students, because like if you kind of apply that thinking to everyone else within this industry, like why would anyone then talk to you on the opposite side? We're all students, we all started out as students, so right now we may be students. 2 years from now, you might be working at a company that I want to do business with, and I will have that contact in place if I talk to you today. I won't have that contact in place if we ignore each other and just talk to people that already have a job in this industry. At the same time, it doesn't have to be all about business. It can just be about creating friendship, especially on like a student junior level, which is always nice. Again, that slide. We can skip that because I'm going over time. A nice example of like treating everyone the same is a very nice guy from Fez. I have like this Fez tattoo on my arm because I really like the game. And I got to meet Renault at GDC this year. And within the indie sphere especially, but also generally in games, it appears that people kind of treat everyone the same. And if you treat everyone the same, cool, we're all on the same layer and we can have honest and open conversations about things. If you approach someone and put them on a different layer than you, they will treat you that way, because it feels weird to them kind of then that you're maybe thinking of them as your hero. So just, yeah, treat everyone the same is kind of the summary. Stay connected. Obviously, there's Twitter, which is great for the games industry. There's LinkedIn, which is also super helpful, especially for business development, and I think still underused, especially within like students or junior circles within this industry. Facebook is a weird one. A lot of people are very private about their Facebook. It's kind of figuring out how they handle it. If someone has 5,000 friends, yeah, I guess it's probably cool to send them a friend request. If someone has 140 friends and most of them are like their family, or you cannot see any more information about their profile, maybe don't. Generally, as kind of a rule of thumb, if you're not on a personal level with that person and haven't known them for quite some time, maybe avoid Facebook. It's very personal for most people. Although in Germany it's sometimes different, especially in the US it's very personal. Business cards, no matter if you're a student just starting off and going to Gamescom, or even still in school, in high school, you should always have business cards, because otherwise I will likely not remember you. It's super nice after an event to go home, have this pile of business cards to sort through, and then remember exactly who you talked to. I think 2 or 3 years ago, Robin Hartmann had a really, really nice session at Game Camp about business cards and how to create, or how they stand out and differentiate from each other. Maybe you can host that again at next year's Game Camp, but that was really, really interesting. And it can be small things like having just a note section where after you've talked to someone, you write down a little paragraph about what you talked about. Or even one thing I think also Robin showed us back then was a game designer that had managed to create a game within his business card, which is really, really cool. And as someone in a hiring position, your first reaction after meeting that person will be like, oh, this stands out from everyone else I talked to today. So that's just a minor thing that will go a long way. Find a mentor is kind of a vague thing because you don't realize it until it's happened. For me, it started off with my then boss, Yassine, who runs Salmi Games, and gave me kind of the first opportunity and actually the trust without me having any credentials to back up my potential skills back then. And he just stuck with me over all these years and helped me out and answered questions that I had. And it doesn't have to be your boss. Like for me, it ended up being people that I collaborated with, people I just met within this industry. And it's always nice to have some people to go to within this industry if you have questions or just honest concerns. volunteering is a very good point. It's kind of where, or how I started off in this industry, by just going to a bunch of events. Events, again, is kind of one big point of this talk. They are super helpful, but they're also super expensive. And the easiest way of making them less expensive is by volunteering your time. Obviously, you will have slightly less time to spend at those events, but you will meet a ton of people through those conversations. A friend of mine the other year wanted to really talk to someone at Sony Santa Monica during DEF CON last year. There were a couple people there, but he was volunteering, didn't think he had the time. In the end, he ended up running one of the stages at DEF CON and just kind of had 15 minutes one-on-one with Cory Barlog because he had to take care of all his equipment. So these small things can go a long way and help you out in the end, and make going to events super cheap, because you might even get paid, or at least a free badge that usually costs up to $1,500 for GDC. Otherwise, be healthy, very important point. I unfortunately managed to collapse twice within my 6 years in games through an epileptic seizure after working for 3 days. You shouldn't do that, and you should be very careful, because that will hurt your health long term. So I can not recommend overworking yourself. On the other hand side, events, as mentioned, there's a ton of events worldwide. I'm not going to show you Talking Deaf again, but September 19th. And there's a lot of variety, and you kind of have to figure out where it makes sense for you to go to. These are just a couple of indie showcases around the world, slightly outdated from 2 years ago, but essentially where you can go within just single organizations. To kind of go back to this slide, if you're a student, you might want to go to the German Dev Days, because it's very student-heavy content, networking. It's very open and free to go to. If you want to network with some major companies in North America, GDC or PAX. And if it comes to launching on mobile, maybe Casual Connect, although I just read yesterday that they no longer exist, or they merge into something else, so I might, maybe not Casual Connect, but other conventions like DevGam is perfect for Eastern Europe. Speaking of PAX and Seattle, one thing to keep in mind when going to an event is, yes, there might be really, really large costs involved in getting to that event, especially if it's on a different continent, at the west coast of the US. That being said, you can make the most out of that appearance. For example, if you're in town for PAX West, stick around for 3 more days, because you'll have the headquarters of Nintendo America, Xbox and the Microsoft campus, and Valve, so Steam, within half an hour of the venue. So just think of that when going to an event as well. We have no time, we can skip that. Otherwise, parties versus show floor. If you go to an event, you should make the most out of it, and that's a big, big part of it. If you're wandering through Gamescom, you will notice there's way too many people to talk to someone. That will not be the case if you're at a small, even being a couple of hundred people after show party during the event. Do your research up front. There's even Facebook groups of people that kind of share their invites with each other for all these parties, and there's entire lists of parties to go to during Gamescom and any other conventions. But just keep that in mind and make sure to have those tickets or those sign-ups before going to the event, because if you're already at Gamescom, most likely all the parties that would be interesting for you to network at will be already sold out, or all tickets will have been given away, something like that. It doesn't have to cost something. Otherwise, online networking, just to briefly touch on that, there is a bunch of platforms. We already discussed Facebook. Xing seems to be German only at this point. I've never heard a US American speak about Xing. Not sure if it's even an international platform. LinkedIn, perfect. Can recommend that. And otherwise, there's very specific platforms to reach out to communities and network in an online sense as well. At least keep in touch. For artists, there's ArtStation. TickSource is perfect for everyone. Game designers specifically, it's really, really nice, but kind of everyone can use it. And then obviously Reddit, Imager, and Discord have their own little communities within those larger non-game specific communities. Yeah, this is way too personal. Don't stalk people and figure out their Instagram or Snapchat necessarily, as long as they don't share it publicly with each other. But I would generally advise against that. And not to really touch too much on universities, but one thing I've seen very much when it comes to universities is when you're super young and introverted and don't really want to talk to anyone or don't have your pre-existing network, it can be a very viable option to actually study to build up that network as well. Obviously, if you've already studied, you shouldn't just go to university to increase your network. That doesn't really make any sense, but it kind of goes hand in hand and can offer you a nice, different network than than what you would have usually. A good example is, I want to say Klonk. I think Robin is already gone. Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, you as well. Yeah, now. But like the originally Klonk team and the original Me Productions team, they found each other, if I'm not mistaken, through the MDH both. So that can be a very nice way to just interact with like-minded folks. And now, what comes after this talk? Games Bavaria. Robin is back there. Talk to him. He has like some great resources to approach or just to talk to him. September 19th. Yeah, Robin is back there. And he will also be here in like a couple of months. There's the Diversity Brunch, which is organized by these wonderful two ladies, Caroline and Rebecca. You should talk to them. It's a really, really nice event. And at the end of the day, just to quickly summarize this, networking is not only selling a product, it's selling yourself, it's selling a product, and if you're not confident in your product enough to sell it, or yourself to sell it, then why should anyone else be confident in you? Just keep that in mind. Also, there's a shit ton of really horrible people that have managed to pitch their projects, whatever their personality in the society. So you will be able to do that as well, because you're all wonderful. This is how you can contact me, and yeah, this was slide 101. Hope to see you at Talk in Dev in a couple of months. Thank you very much.